Hello, hello. Happy Monday morning, afternoon, whenever it is that you're watching this. I have just put up my second episode for the podcast, which is so interesting, like listening over that again. It was a podcast that I recorded last year, in December last year, with my good friend Dennis. And we went to school together, and he saw that I'd written a book, and he reached out to me. He's like, hey, can I interview you for a podcast? And that was back December last year. And listening to that, it's so interesting to hear the growth that I've been through since then, but also too to just listen to some of the declarations that I made, like a little bit shiny. So like he's like, okay, so what do we expect to see in the future from Wild Woman Free? And even in December last year, I declared that I'd be having a podcast and hosting a podcast. And what's amazing is this last week, since I launched the podcast, I've been in contact with 3 people who are going to be guests on my podcast, and I'm setting all that in motion. I'm so excited because they're such different humans. They're incredible women in their own right, and they're all just so different. So I'm super excited to bring that to you guys. And also, yeah, just listening back to, what I said back in December was my declaration for the coming year or for the future. It also talked about offerings for men as well. And that is actually something that I am looking at bringing into the space. And although my name is Wild Woman Free, or at least that's the business name, I still think that, it can still, there's so much space here for men to learn. And one of the beautiful things is learning through, men in our society have kind of been shamed away from a lot of things that make them very masculine. And there is a lot of wounded masculine going around, which is, the controlling, the over assertion. And there's also a lot of wounded feminine. Like every one of us has a mix of feminine and masculine energy. So I'm not saying guys are too girly, but what I'm saying is that there is a feminine energy even in men. And the wounded masculine usually exists so strongly in their masculine, in that masculine energy, that surrendering and allowing and learning and manifesting is difficult to do, because even allowing and surrendering to feelings is and has been viewed as a very girly thing to do, a very feminine thing to do. And in actual fact, yes, there is a feminine aspect to it. However, it is also surrendering to the feminine that is so important for a man to help bring about a lot of emotional health, spiritual health, and physical health to him as well. So, I'll be touching on some of that, and I am going over the rest of the offerings that I have for the year, and also moving into next year as well. And I'm really excited by some of the things that are coming through, and yeah, I'm really just surrendering to that and allowing whatever happens. But yeah, super interesting to listen back to that and thinking and remembering that time, and setting an intention that I would be interviewed on a podcast, and then that happening, and setting an intention for having a podcast happen, and that happening. And also just like I remember when I was looking, when I had that pull to write that book. The book was written within three days or 5 days or something like that, and it was this compulsion to absolutely get it done, even though it wasn't perfect, and just get it out there, because otherwise I'd be stuck in the getting perfect. And that's really how this podcast came about too. And that's how quite a few things have sort of come about for me. I feel as though there's this pull and this compulsion to just get it done and get it out there, even though it's not perfect. And my inner perfectionist freaks out. But still, there's there is beauty that comes in surrendered action. And I feel as though some of these things and a lot of the biggest things for me have been out of surrendered action. And there's so much learning there. And there's so much learning even just in the process of the surrender. And sometimes, sometimes action is surrendered because there is so much of a pull. It's harder to not do it than to do it. And that's when you surrender to taking the action that you feel inspired to take. I hope this helps in some way. I send you so much love and bliss. And yeah, I would love to hear your takeaways on the podcast. It's an old one, so obviously things are there's a lot that's changed, but I forgot to turn my notifications off. But also it's just a beautiful thing to look back on too and listen to, like an insight, a little window into my life. And it talks about too, like what happened with when I became a single mum, just what that shift looked like. And it also goes into cognitive dissonance. If you want to know, there's like a list of things that I kind of went over in the show notes. But yeah, all the best. Have an incredible day, and I will talk to you all soon.